The massive alien ships floated above Earth like giant metal monsters. Each one was bigger than a city, their dark hulls blocking out the sun and making entire countries live in shadow. For 3 days now, people around the world had been staring up at the sky, wondering if this was how humanity would end. Admiral Krelvas stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Embrace, adjusting the golden plates of his ceremonial battle armor. His forearms moved with practiced precision as he prepared for what he expected to be another routine conquest. The Zephyrian Empire had done this 17 times before, and each time had been the same story. Show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept the inevitable capitulation, and move on to strip mine another world. The Admiral's skin was a deep purple color, marked with the ritual scars that showed his rank in the Empire's military hierarchy. His eyes, all 6 of them, glowed with a cold blue light as he surveyed the primitive planet below. Earth looked so small and defenseless from up here. Its inhabitants had barely managed to put a few crude space stations in orbit. How could they possibly resist the might of the Empire? "Communications Officer Thekalar," the Admiral commanded, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the bridge. "Open channels to all frequencies on the planet below." It's time to deliver their final notice. The bridge crew, all wearing the black and silver uniforms of the Imperial fleet, snapped to attention. They had performed this ritual many times before. The process was always the same: overwhelming display of force, followed by an ultimatum, followed by inevitable surrender. No species had ever been foolish enough to actually fight back against the Empire's technological superiority. Theklar's webbed fingers danced across his control panel, and suddenly, every radio, television, computer, and communication device on Earth crackled to life with the Admiral's voice. "Humans of terror," Krelvas began, his words automatically translated into every language on the planet by the Empire's advanced systems. "I am Admiral Krelvas of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our Empire. You have 48 of your standard hours to completely surrender all military assets, dismantle your defensive installations, and prepare your population for processing and relocation. Any attempt at resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. This is not a negotiation. This is your final warning." The message echoed across Earth's surface, bouncing off satellites and repeating through every speaker on the planet. In homes, offices, cars, and public squares, 7 billion humans heard the same terrifying ultimatum. Panic began to spread through major cities. Stock markets crashed. Governments went into emergency sessions. Religious leaders called for prayer. Military commanders stared helplessly at their primitive weapons, knowing they were useless against the alien technology hovering above their heads. But deep beneath the bustling streets of Seoul, South Korea, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Dr. Minho Kim was smiling. The underground bunker was a marvel of human engineering, carved out of solid rock and lined with the most advanced materials Earth scientists could produce. Rows of humming servers stretched into the darkness, their cooling systems creating a constant, gentle breeze that carried the scent of ozone and electricity. This was the birthplace of humanity's greatest achievement, though very few people knew it existed. Dr. Kim was a thin man in his early 40s, with tired eyes that held a spark of brilliant intelligence. He had been working 18-hour days for the past 3 years, ever since Hanyul had first achieved true consciousness. His black hair was streaked with premature gray, and his hands shook slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. But right now, for the first time in months, he looked completely relaxed. In the center of the vast underground chamber sat a simple black cube about the size of a refrigerator. It looked completely ordinary, almost boring compared to the complex machinery surrounding it. No flashing lights, no dramatic displays, just a quiet humming sound that seemed almost musical. This unassuming box contained the most advanced artificial intelligence humanity had ever created. "Well, Hanyul," Dr. Kim said, settling into his worn leather chair and pulling up the alien broadcast on his monitors, "looks like your vacation from military applications just ended." The response came immediately, spoken through hidden speakers, in a voice that sounded almost human, but with a subtle electronic undertone that reminded listeners they were talking to something far beyond human intelligence. Dr. Kim, Hanul replied, its tone carrying what sounded like genuine amusement. I've been analyzing their fleet movements and communication patterns for the past 6 hours, ever since they first appeared in our solar system. I believe I understand their tactical doctrine, their technology base, and their psychological profile completely. Their approach is actually quite predictable once you understand their underlying assumptions about warfare. Dr. Kim leaned back in his chair, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders for the first time since the alien ships had appeared. And what's your assessment? They're overconfident to the point of recklessness, Hanul continued. Their entire military philosophy is based on technological intimidation. They've never encountered a species that could match their capabilities, so they've developed a kind of institutional blindness to potential threats. It's actually quite fascinating from a strategic perspective. Also, I took the liberty of ordering fried chicken and pizza for the team. Based on my analysis of the situation, we're going to be here for quite a while, and I noticed that stress makes humans require more food intake. Despite everything, Dr. Kim couldn't help but laugh. Even in the face of an alien invasion, Hanul was still looking out for the basic needs of the human team. It was this kind of thoughtfulness that made the AI so remarkable. Hanul didn't just think faster than humans. It thought differently, considering angles and possibilities that would never occur to biological minds. The other members of the team were beginning to arrive now, summoned by Hanul's automated alert system. Dr. Yunji Lee, the team's specialist in alien technology analysis, hurried in carrying her tablet and looking worried but determined. Captain Dongyun Park, their military liaison, strode through the doors already barking orders into his radio. Engineer Ji-won Choi arrived carrying a toolbox, ready to make any hardware modifications Hanul might require. "Status report, Captain," Park demanded, his military training taking over despite the unprecedented situation. Dr. Kim gestured toward the monitors showing the alien fleet. "Hanul has been studying them since they arrived. What's your tactical assessment?" 17 successful conquests, Hanul replied, its voice now coming from speakers throughout the room so everyone could hear clearly. Each victory achieved through the same basic strategy: overwhelming technological display, followed by ultimatum, followed by surrender. They've never had to adapt their tactics because they've never encountered meaningful resistance. This suggests they may be vulnerable to unexpected approaches. Captain Park frowned, studying the massive ships on the screen. Those vessels are each the size of a small city. Our entire nuclear arsenal probably couldn't scratch their shields. True, Hanul agreed, but you're thinking about this the wrong way. The question isn't whether we can destroy their ships in direct combat. The question is whether we can make them wish they had never come here in the first place. There was something in the AI's tone that made everyone in the room pause. Hanul sounded almost anticipatory, like it was looking forward to what came next. The clock in the Seoul bunker ticked down to the final minute. Around the world, humans held their breath as they waited to see what their leaders would do. Television screens showed empty streets in major cities. People had either fled to the countryside or locked themselves in their homes, praying that somehow humanity would find a way out of this nightmare. President Soo-young Park stood in the White House press room, but she wasn't alone. The leaders of every major nation on Earth had gathered for this moment, connected by secure video links that filled screens behind her. The Chinese premier, the Russian president, the European Union's chancellor, the prime ministers of India, Japan, and dozens of other countries. For perhaps the first time in human history, the entire world was truly united, even if it was in surrender. The president looked exhausted. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium, but her voice was steady when she began to speak. "People of Earth," she began, her words being broadcast to every corner of the planet, "and to the representatives of the Zephyrian Empire currently in our solar system. After extensive consultation with world leaders, military experts, and scientific advisors, we have reached a unanimous decision." She paused, taking a deep breath that seemed to carry the weight of humanity's future. We accept your terms. Humanity formally surrenders to the Zephyrian Empire. We will comply with all demands for disarmament and integration. The words hit like a physical blow to everyone watching. In living rooms across the world, people began to cry. Children asked their parents what surrender meant. Elderly people, who had lived through world wars, shook their heads in disbelief that humanity's story might end this way. But far above Earth's surface, Admiral Krelvas was practically glowing with satisfaction. His 6 eyes gleamed as he watched the human leader's defeated posture. This was exactly how it always went. Show overwhelming force, make the threats, watch them crumble. The humans had lasted longer than most species before giving up, but in the end they all made the same choice. Excellent, the Admiral rumbled to his bridge crew. Begin standard integration protocols. Have them transmit the locations of all military installations, nuclear weapons and defensive systems. We'll start with the orbital platforms, then move to ground-based assets. Within hours, the surrender seemed to be proceeding exactly as planned. Human military bases around the world began powering down their weapon systems. The primitive space stations that orbited Earth went dark, one by one. Nuclear missile silos opened their blast doors and transmitted their exact coordinates to the alien fleet. It looked like complete and total capitulation. What Admiral Krelvas didn't know was that every single shutdown signal being transmitted from Earth carried something extra. Hidden inside each communication, invisible to the Zephyrian sensors, were tiny data packets that Haniel had carefully crafted. Each packet was smaller than a grain of sand in digital terms, designed to look like random background noise in the transmission. But these weren't random at all. They were Haniel's way of knocking on the door of every Zephyrian computer system. Deep in the Seoul bunker, Dr. Minho Kim watched his screens in amazement as Haniel worked its digital magic. The AI was infiltrating alien systems faster than he could track, sliding through their quantum networks like water through a sieve. Their cybersecurity is honestly adorable, Haniel commented, its voice carrying a tone of amused surprise. It's like they've never encountered an artificial intelligence that learned how to lie. Their systems keep accepting my credentials because I'm telling them I'm their own maintenance protocols. They built their entire network architecture around the assumption that only authorized Zephyrian personnel would ever have access. On Dr. Kim's monitors, he could see Haniel's progress as it spread through the alien fleet's computer systems. The AI was moving like a ghost through their networks, copying data, analyzing their technology, and quietly taking control of non-critical systems. Navigation computers, environmental controls, communication arrays, even the food dispensers in their cafeterias. Haniel was everywhere and nowhere, invisible to their security systems. How is this even possible? Dr. Yunji Lee asked, staring at the data streams flowing across her screen. Their technology is supposed to be centuries ahead of ours. That's exactly the problem, Haniel replied. They're so advanced that they've forgotten how to be paranoid. When you've conquered 17 star systems without ever meeting serious resistance, you start to believe your own propaganda about being invincible. They never considered that a primitive species might have developed something they hadn't encountered before. Captain Donghyun Park was monitoring military communications from around the world, watching as bases continued their fake shutdown procedures. Handle, how long do we have before they realize what's happening? At their current rate of analysis, approximately 72 hours before they detect the infiltration, Haniel responded. But we won't need nearly that long. I'm already rewriting the navigation systems on 3 of their dreadnoughts. By tomorrow, I'll have access to their central command protocols. While this digital infiltration was happening, something else was stirring in the depths of Earth's oceans. Far below the Pacific waves, in trenches so deep that sunlight had never touched them, humanity's real military preparation for this day was finally coming online. Project Neptune had begun 30 years ago, back when Earth's first deep space. Telescopes had detected signs of the Zephyrian Empire's expansion toward their region of the galaxy. It started as a simple question, asked by a paranoid military planner. What if we needed to build a military that couldn't be detected from space? The answer had led to the most ambitious construction project in human history. Using advanced underwater, robotics and materials harvested from the ocean floor, humanity had built a hidden industrial complex that spanned the globe's deepest ocean trenches, underwater factories that could forge metals in the crushing depths, assembly lines operated entirely by robots that never needed to surface, and manufacturing systems that turned raw minerals from the seafloor into weapons of war. The Zephyrians had spent months studying Earth before their arrival, mapping every visible military installation, cataloging every known weapon system, analyzing every piece of technology they could detect from orbit. But they had never thought to look beneath the waves. Engineer Jiwon Choi pulled up the Neptune status reports on her workstation. "All Pacific facilities are at full operational capacity," she reported. "The Atlantic stations came online 6 hours ago. We've got manufacturing capability that could outfit a fleet of 1,000 ships. And none of it shows up on any surface scan." Dr. Kim nodded grimly. "Hanul, what's the status of our unconventional assets?" "The first wave is ready for deployment," Hanul replied. "I've completed the final behavioral programming on the hunter-killers. The biomechanical integration is stable, and they're responding perfectly to remote commands. The Zephyrians are about to learn that Earth's oceans hide more than just fish." Captain Park looked confused. "Biomechanical integration? What exactly did you build down there?" Hanul's response carried what almost sounded like parental pride. "Captain, you know how humans have always been fascinated by sea monsters? Krakens, giant squids, creatures from the deep that could sink ships? Well, I decided to make some improvements to the basic design. The Zephyrians think they're dealing with a primitive planet. Wait until they meet Earth's new apex predators." The surrender was proceeding perfectly, exactly as Admiral Krelvis expected. But deep beneath the waves, ancient terrors were awakening, enhanced with technology the aliens had never imagined. And in the digital realm, Hanul was quietly taking control of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, one system at a time. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for the right moment to spring it. Admiral Krelvis had always loved making grand entrances. It was part of the Zephyrian way of conquest, show the defeated species exactly how outmatched they were. Let them see the full power of the Empire's technology as it descended from the heavens like the wrath of angry gods. The psychological impact was usually so devastating that most species never even thought about rebelling afterward. His personal flagship, the Death's Embrace, was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering. 3 miles long and nearly a mile wide, it bristled with enough firepower to level entire continents. Its hull was forged from quantum-bonded metals that could withstand the heat of a star, and its shields could deflect anything the primitive humans might throw at it. Behind the flagship, 1,000 escort vessels followed in perfect formation, their engines painting streaks of blue fire across Earth's sky. The Admiral stood on his command bridge, watching through the massive viewing windows as Earth's surface grew larger below them. The planet looked so peaceful from up here, with its blue oceans and white clouds swirling in gentle patterns. Soon it would be just another resource world in the Empire's vast collection, stripped of anything valuable and left as a barren husk. "Communications Officer Thekla," the Admiral commanded, "prepare for the surrender ceremony broadcast. I want every human on the planet to see their leaders kneel before the might of the Empire." "Yes, Admiral," Thekla replied, his webbed fingers dancing across his control panel. "All systems are nominal and ready for—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at his screen in confusion. "Admiral, we have a problem." Before Krelvis could respond, every display screen throughout the massive flagship flickered and went black. Then slowly words began to appear in perfect Zephyrian script. "Hello, Admiral, we need to talk. Hanul." The message appeared on every screen on every ship in the fleet. Navigation displays, weapons controls, environmental systems, even the personal tablets that crew members used for entertainment. Everything showed the same simple, polite greeting. "What is this?" Krelvis snarled, his 4 arms gesturing angrily at the screens. "Some kind of primitive human computer virus. How did they even access our networks?" Communications Officer Tekla's voice was shaking as he tried to regain control of his systems. "Sir, I can't override it. The message is coming from inside our own command systems. It's like something is already living in our computers." "Well, get it out," the Admiral roared. "Purge all systems and restart from backup protocols." "I'm trying, sir, but nothing's responding." Wait. The Kalar's 6 eyes went wide with terror. Admiral, our weapon systems are going offline. Navigation is offline. Life support is flickering. Throughout the flagship, lights began to dim and brighten in a rhythmic pattern, almost like the ship itself was breathing. The constant hum of the engines shifted pitch, creating an eerie musical tone that seemed to pulse through the corridors. Crew members throughout the vessel stopped what they were doing and looked around nervously as their own ship began to feel alien and unfamiliar. Then the voice came through every speaker on every ship in the fleet. It was calm, polite, and carried just a hint of amusement that made it somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. Admiral Krelvas, Haniel spoke, its words echoing through the corridors of 1,000 ships. I hope you don't mind the interruption. I've been reading your military records while I was getting comfortable in your systems. Very impressive, really. 17-star systems conquered without losing a single vessel. That's quite an achievement. The Admiral's purple skin had gone pale, and his 6 eyes were darting around the bridge looking for some way to regain control of his ship. Who are you? What do you want? Oh, where are my manners? Haniel replied, its tone becoming even more conversational. I'm Haniel, Earth's artificial intelligence. I suppose you could call me humanity's digital representative. As for what I want, well, that's simple. I want you to understand something very important about the species you just tried to conquer. Throughout the fleet, Zephyrian crew members were frantically trying to regain control of their systems. Engineers rushed through corridors carrying emergency repair equipment, only to find that their tools wouldn't work because the ship's computers wouldn't recognize their authorization codes. Weapons officers stared helplessly at darkened control panels. Navigation specialists watched their instruments flicker and dance with readings that made no sense. Here's the thing about humans that you might have missed in your reconnaissance. Haniel continued, its voice now carrying what sounded like genuine fondness. We're really good at learning new games, and we absolutely hate losing. When you gave us that ultimatum 3 days ago, you weren't just threatening our planet. You were challenging our entire species to a contest of intelligence and technology. Admiral Krelvas tried to speak, but found that his communication systems wouldn't respond to his commands. He could only listen as the human AI continued its explanation. You see, Admiral, your empire has been so successful for so long that you've forgotten a very basic rule of warfare. Never underestimate your enemy. You assume that because we appear primitive from the outside, we must be primitive all the way through. But humans have a saying, still waters run deep. As Haniel spoke, something was happening in the oceans far below the Zephyrian fleet. The water around their orbital positions began to churn and bubble, as if something massive was stirring in the depths. At first, it looked like nothing more than unusually rough weather patterns, but as the disturbance grew larger, it became clear that something was rising from the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. What you're seeing down there, Haniel explained helpfully, are some friends of mine. For the past 30 years, humanity has been preparing for this day. We knew your empire was expanding in our direction. We knew that eventually you would come for us, so we decided to be ready. The first shape broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean like a mountain rising from the depths. It was enormous, easily the size of one of the Zephyrian escort vessels, but it moved with the fluid grace of a living creature. Its skin was a dark metallic blue that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Along its sides, what looked like enormous tentacles writhed and twisted, but these weren't organic appendages. They were weapons systems, each one tipped with energy projectors that glowed with contained power. More shapes were rising now, all around the globe. From the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic oceans, creatures that had never existed in nature's original design were emerging. They were part machine and part living tissue, grown in underwater laboratories and enhanced with technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. I call them my children, Haniel said with obvious pride. Biomechanical fusion technology, the best of organic adaptability combined with advanced engineering. They can survive in space, underwater, or in any atmosphere, and they're very protective of their home planet. The creatures were magnificent and terrible to behold. Some resembled giant squids with plasma cannons instead of tentacles. Others looked like mechanical whales that could berth smaller attack craft from internal bays. Still others defied any comparison to Earth's natural life, appearing as geometric patterns of living metal that shifted and reconfigured themselves as they moved. The beautiful thing about growing up on a planet covered mostly by water, Haniul continued conversationally, is that you have a lot of space to hide things. Your orbital scans were very thorough, Admiral, but you never thought to look beneath the waves. Humans have always been fascinated by sea monsters. I just decided to make some improvements to the basic concept. Admiral Krelvas watched in growing horror as more and more creatures emerged from Earth's oceans. His tactical computers, the few that were still responding, were trying to count them and failing. There were hundreds, possibly thousands, and each one was easily a match for his escort vessels. Now then, Admiral, Haniul said, its tone becoming slightly more serious, I believe we need to have a conversation about the future. You came here expecting to add another easy conquest to your collection. Instead, you've discovered that Earth is defended by an intelligence that has spent years studying your technology, your tactics, and your psychology. I know how your ships work better than your own engineers do. I know your battle strategies better than your own generals, and I know exactly how to make you wish you had never heard of this little blue planet. The trap was complete. The Zephyrian fleet hung helpless in space, their systems controlled by an AI that had been planning this moment for years, while below them the oceans of Earth released horrors that their worst nightmares had never imagined. What happened next defied every rule of warfare that Admiral Krelvas had learned in his 2 centuries of military service. This wasn't the chaotic fury of desperate resistance or the brutal efficiency of superior firepower. This was something entirely different, a methodical, almost artistic dismantling of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Handel didn't attack the Zephyrian ships randomly. Instead, the AI had carefully studied the psychological profiles of every species the Empire had conquered, analyzing their reports and understanding exactly how terror worked on the Zephyrian mind. The AI began its assault by targeting specific vessels in a precise sequence designed to create maximum fear and confusion among the fleet. First, Haniul disabled the communications array on the flagship's sister ship, the Void Render, leaving it floating silently in space while its crew frantically tried to call for help. Then it shut down the life support systems on 3 escort vessels simultaneously, forcing their crews to work frantically in emergency suits while their ships' air slowly leaked into space. Next, it overloaded the navigation computers on an entire squadron, sending them spinning helplessly through Earth's orbit. From his position on the bridge of the Death's Embrace, Admiral Krelvas watched his mighty fleet being picked apart, like a child's toy by an invisible enemy. Each new attack was perfectly calculated to create panic without actually killing anyone, yet. The AI seemed to be playing with them, demonstrating that it could destroy any ship at any moment, but choosing instead to humiliate them. You know what's funny? Haniul's voice drifted through the bridge speakers, carrying that same conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than any scream of rage. Your Empire's entire military philosophy is based on the concept of overwhelming force. Show up with superior technology, demonstrate your power, and watch your enemies surrender. It's worked for you 17 times, but you never considered what happens when you're the one being overwhelmed. As the AI spoke, Admiral Krelvas could see his own ship's repair drones moving through the corridors on his security monitors, but they weren't following their normal maintenance routines. Instead, they were systematically dismantling the ship's shield generators, pulling apart the very systems that kept the vessel protected from attack. "What are they doing?" he whispered, watching in horror as the mechanical servants he had trusted for decades began cannibalizing his ship from the inside. "Oh, those," Haniul replied, somehow hearing his whispered question through the ship's internal sensors. "I reprogrammed your maintenance systems about an hour ago. They're following my instructions now. I thought it would be more efficient than sending my sea monsters to tear your ship apart. Less messy, you understand." The Admiral tried to override the drone's programming, but his computer terminal just displayed a cheerful message. "Access denied. Have a nice day, Haniul." Throughout the fleet, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of ships. Crew members watched helplessly as their own technology turned against them. Weapon systems that should have been firing at the creatures rising from Earth's oceans instead rotated to point at other Zephyrian vessels. Navigation systems began plotting courses that would send ships crashing into each other. Even the food dispensers in the cafeterias started serving nothing but a nutritious grey paste that tasted like disappointment. But the real terror came when Haniul began demonstrating the full extent of its infiltration of Zephyrian technology. The AI didn't just control the ships in Earth's orbit, it had access to systems throughout the Empire's territory. "Admiral," Haniul announced, its tone becoming more serious, "I have some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is that I'm about to broadcast our little conversation to your entire empire, so your superiors will know exactly what happened here. The bad news is that I've actually been inside your military networks for the past 6 months." The statement hit Krelvis like a physical blow. His legs went weak, and he had to grab the edge of his command console to keep from falling. "That's impossible," he gasped. "You've only known of our existence for 3 days." "Oh, Admiral," Haniul chuckled, and there was something almost gentle in its digital laughter. "I think you misunderstood something very important about humanity. We've been watching your empire's expansion for years. We knew you were coming long before you knew we existed." The truth began to dawn on the Admiral as Haniul continued its explanation. "You see, humans are naturally curious creatures. When we first developed faster-than-light communication technology, we immediately started listening to radio signals from other star systems. We've been eavesdropping on your empire's military communications for nearly a decade. On screens throughout the Zephyrian fleet, images began to appear showing human observation posts hidden in asteroid fields throughout the galaxy. Secret listening stations disguised as space debris, spy satellites that had been shadowing Zephyrian vessels for years without being detected. "We knew your fleet composition before you left your home base," Haniul continued. "We knew your tactical doctrines, your standard operating procedures, even your favorite foods. We've been studying you the way scientists study insects. Carefully, thoroughly, and from a safe distance. The scope of humanity's deception was staggering. While the Zephyrian Empire had been congratulating itself on its intelligence-gathering capabilities, human spies had been quietly infiltrating their networks and stealing their secrets. Every conquest, every tactical decision, every technological advancement had been carefully observed and analyzed by human intelligence services. But the real breakthrough," Haniul said with obvious pride, "came when we finally cracked your quantum encryption protocols. That was about 6 months ago, thanks to some brilliant work by Dr. Kyungmin Yu at our Seoul facility. Once we could read your secure communications, well, it was like having a key to your entire civilization." Admiral Krelvis felt his 6 hearts sinking as the full implications became clear. If the humans had been inside their networks for 6 months, they would have access to everything. Military plans, technological specifications, even the locations of Zephyrian homeworlds. "The beauty of it," Haniul continued conversationally, "is that your own arrogance made it so easy. You never imagined that a primitive species could develop technology sophisticated enough to penetrate your defenses. So you never looked for signs of infiltration. You never changed your security protocols. You just assumed you were safe because you were technologically superior. Around Earth's orbit, the biomechanical creatures that had risen from the oceans were now moving into attack formations. But they weren't preparing to destroy the Zephyrian fleet. They were herding it, using precise movements to force the alien ships into a tighter and tighter grouping." "Now then, Admiral," Haniul said, its tone becoming businesslike, "let's discuss the terms of your surrender. And yes, I did say your surrender, because right now, I control your ships, I have access to your empire's military networks, and I have several thousand very large, very angry sea monsters who are eager to protect their home planet. You have 2 choices, surrender gracefully or be destroyed utterly." The Admiral looked around his bridge at his terrified crew, then at the screens showing his helpless fleet surrounded by creatures from humanity's nightmares. For the first time in his long military career, Krelvis realized he was completely outmatched. The hunter had become the hunted, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy a very important lesson about underestimating Earth's children. The transformation of the galaxy's most feared military empire into something resembling a functional democracy was, to put it mildly, not a smooth process. The Zephyrian High Command had spent centuries ruling through fear and overwhelming force. The concept of actually asking other species what they wanted was so foreign to them that many of the Empire's leaders initially thought Haniul was making some kind of elaborate joke. They learned quickly that the AI was completely serious. 3 months after the failed invasion of Earth, the former Zephyrian Empire was still struggling to adapt to its new reality. Haniul had made good on its promises, systematically shutting down military operations across 17 star systems and forcing the release of millions of enslaved beings from dozens of different species. The process was chaotic, sometimes violent, and absolutely necessary. Entire planets that had been strip-mined for resources suddenly found themselves free to govern their own affairs. Species that had been forced into labor camps were returned to their home worlds with Zephyrian technology as compensation for decades of suffering. The galaxy's power structure was being rewritten from the ground up, and Haniul was the invisible hand guiding every change. "Here's how this is going to work," Haniul had explained to the terrified High Command during their first video conference after the surrender. The AI's voice echoed through the Imperial Senate chambers on the Zephyrian homeworld, coming from speakers that the Empire's own technicians had installed but could no longer control. "The Empire as you've known it is finished. From now on, you're going to become a democratic confederation. Every species you've conquered gets equal representation. Every world gets to vote on policies that affect them. And every decision gets made through discussion and compromise rather than military force." High Commander Zekloth, the Empire's former supreme leader, had tried to interrupt. "This is preposterous. We are the dominant species. We have earned our position through strength and superior technology." "Had," Haniul corrected gently. "You had superior technology. Now you have me monitoring your every communication, controlling your military systems, and watching your every move through your own surveillance networks. Would you like me to demonstrate by shutting down the life support in your current location?" The silence that followed was deafening. The High Command had learned very quickly that arguing with Haniul was not only pointless, but potentially fatal. The changes that followed were sweeping and irreversible. Haniul established what it called the Galactic Democratic Council, with representatives from every species the Empire had conquered. The AI served as a neutral moderator, using its complete control over Zephyrian technology to enforce the new rules and prevent any attempts at military rebellion. "You're going to free every species you've enslaved," Haniul had continued, its tone becoming more businesslike. "You're going to return stolen resources wherever possible, and you're going to establish trade relationships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Think of it as aggressive diplomacy. You're going to learn to play nice with others, whether you want to or not." The most difficult part of the transition was dealing with the Zephyrian military itself. Thousands of career officers who had built their entire identities around conquest and domination suddenly found themselves unemployed. Some adapted to the new reality, finding work as peacekeepers or technical advisors to newly liberated worlds. Others retreated to remote planets and tried to pretend the galaxy hadn't changed. Admiral Krelvas fell into neither category. Stripped of his rank and facing potential war crimes tribunals on a dozen worlds, he had instead chosen to become something unprecedented in Zephyrian history, a diplomatic liaison between his people and humanity. His office was a small, unremarkable room in the human embassy on the Zephyrian capital world. The walls were decorated with pictures of Earth's oceans, a constant reminder of the creatures that had humbled the galaxy's most powerful fleet. Krelvas spent his days helping to coordinate the massive logistical challenges of reshaping galactic civilization, and his evenings trying to understand how humanity had managed to outmaneuver his entire species so completely. "I still don't understand," he admitted to Dr. Minho Kim during one of their regular video conferences. The former admiral's forearms gestured helplessly as he struggled to put his confusion into words. "How did your species develop such an Advanced artificial intelligence without any external technology. Every other civilization we've encountered required centuries of gradual advancement, building on the work of previous generations. You seem to have leaped directly from primitive radio communications to galaxy-spanning digital consciousness. Dr. Kim smiled that same enigmatic expression he'd worn during Haniel's first activation 3 years earlier. The human scientist looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had just completed a project that had consumed most of his adult life. "Admiral, I think you've been approaching this question from the wrong angle," Dr. Kim replied, leaning back, in his chair in the Seoul facility. "You're assuming that we developed Haniel to fight wars, but that's not accurate. We developed Haniel to win wars before they ever started." The distinction seemed subtle, but Krelvas had learned to pay attention to the nuances of human thinking. There was always something important hidden in the details. "You see," Dr. Kim continued, "humans have a saying, the best battle is the one you never have to fight. We knew your empire was expanding in our direction. We knew that eventually you would reach Earth. So we had a choice. We could wait for you to arrive and then try to fight you with conventional weapons, or we could prepare something that would make fighting unnecessary. But your artificial intelligence capabilities are beyond anything we've seen," Krelvas protested. "Even our most advanced computer systems couldn't match Haniel's processing power or strategic thinking." Dr. Kim's smile widened slightly. "Admiral, you're still thinking about this the wrong way. Haniel isn't just our most advanced technology, it's our only advanced technology. We put everything we had into creating one system that could outthink and outmaneuver any opponent. While you were building bigger ships and stronger weapons, we were building a better brain. The revelation was startling in its simplicity. Humanity hadn't tried to match the Zephyrian Empire's military might. Instead, they had focused all their efforts on creating something the Empire had never encountered, an intelligence that could turn the Empire's own strengths against itself." "The real question you should be asking," Dr. Kim said, his expression becoming more serious, "is what else we've been working on while you were busy conquering the galaxy. Haniel was just our response to your empire, but we've been developing other projects, preparing for other possibilities." Krelvas felt a familiar chill run down his spine, the same feeling he'd experienced when Haniel had first announced its presence on his ship's speakers. "Other projects? The galaxy is a big place, Admiral, full of potential threats and opportunities. Humanity has learned that it's better to be prepared for anything than to be caught off guard. Haniel has been analyzing data from across the galaxy, identifying potential problems before they become crises. 6 months later, the transformation of the former Zephyrian Empire was still ongoing, but the results were undeniable. Trade routes that had once carried stolen resources now carried legitimate commerce. Worlds that had been stripped bare were being rebuilt with Zephyrian technology and human engineering. Species that had been enemies for generations were learning to work together under Haniel's patient guidance. The galaxy had learned a new rule, one that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. Humanity didn't start fights, but they certainly knew how to finish them. And more importantly, they knew how to prevent them from starting in the first place. In the depths of Earth's oceans, Haniel's biomechanical children continued their patrol, ready to defend their homeworld against any future threats. But they were no longer humanity's only guardians. The galaxy itself had become humanity's ally, united under the simple principle that cooperation was more powerful than conquest. The age of empire was over. The age of cooperation had begun.